Welcome back, everyone. I'm Nick.
And I'm Fred, and cross over into the frightful frontier with us.
A show where we search for the best horror and sci-fi humans have to offer.
Today we have a special treat for you. We emailed David Sodergren about his book, Maggie's Grave. It was our frightful find for March this year. And email him, just asking him a couple questions about the book. I think we got like 10 questions here.
Yep.
And he was kind enough to answer very quickly and very well. I mean, we didn't really expect to get anything out of it. We were like, oh, let's see if he answers. Like, he seems like a really cool guy. We follow him on all his socials and everything. And to our surprise, he answered us. And
in like a day and a half or something, we were like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's busy too. He's like, he's busy schedule, and he's writing another book right now too. So we were just gonna go through all the questions we sent over to him and his answers, and show you guys, what he said and more about Maggie's Grave, really.
Yeah. So, like Fred said, some of these questions are directly about Maggie's Grave. Some are more about his processes and inspirations and things like that. If you're worried about spoilers, you gotta find another video.
It's too late.
Yeah. There will be spoilers in this video for Maggie's Grave. So if you're interested in reading that, please go do so before you watch this video. It is 100% worth the read.
Yeah.
It was a great story. So go read the book and then watch our review video and then dive into this one with us.
Yeah. Because we asked some questions directly from the book.
Yeah.
You know, so... it's really going to be a bummer if you see the questions first and then read the book. So
from this point on, this is your final warning. Spoilers. Get out of here if you're worried about them. That being said, question 1 has some context for the book. Do you want to kick us off with question 1?
Yes. All right. Question 1: does the girl that came to town, Courtney, have anything to do with the witch? This was a big question for me when I was reading the book. Because it felt like Courtney was just like thrown into the town. Yeah. And then she is kind of like the inciting incident for the story. So I thought maybe she was part of the witch's, plan, I guess.
Yeah. I totally agree with you there because of the way that she just came in and then was so all about going to see the witch's grave, and then the activities between her and Steve at the grave was like, is she the witch?
Yeah, that's a weird thing to want.
Like out of nowhere, just come into town and be so ready for exactly what happened was like, okay. So I was with you where, so did Courtney have anything to do with the witch? His response was,
in my mind, she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I'm happy for people to interpret the story in their own way. So if you think she was somehow a catalyst for Maggie, then that's fine.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
I think it makes the most sense in the context of the story. It really was just for our own satisfaction. We didn't think there would be necessarily a right answer or anything, which I love his answer because he's cool with however people interpret his art. These stories that he writes. He's not so caught up in like, no, you have to think about this book that I wrote this way. He's open to it being whatever you want, which I think probably leads to writing as many successful stories as he has. You have to kind of disconnect yourself and understand that people are going to interpret these stories however they want.
Yeah, and I like interpreting the way that she was like part of the witch's plan. I do kind of like that vibe a little bit more because like that whole story where she's from Wisconsin. Yeah. And all that stuff is just like she just made that all up, and she's the catalyst for Maggie. And
I like that idea, but I actually kind of just like the wrong place at the wrong time a little bit more. So like that's perfect for us where, we're each interpreting it a little bit differently, but neither of us are wrong. It's just however we take it. So I love that was kind of David's intention, and he did such a good job writing it that came across to the audience where we interpret it differently and both feel like they could be the right answer. So I think that's really cool. The second question we asked him, again, was directly related to the story. If you'll remember in the story, the ritual that the townspeople were going to have, they had Alice like tied up like they were going to burn her in some old style dress. They had her son in like a bassinet or something next to her, and then it was basically all the old townspeople just having an orgy.
Yeah.
Which was like, for me, it felt like,
What's the orgy do?
Yeah, I didn't have the proper context to it. So our question to him was, what were the town people trying to accomplish with this ritual? Would it actually work? David's response was, as we've already warned you, spoilers ahead, but he made sure to include that in his response as well. He said, spoilers ahead. From what I remember, I wrote the book about 5 years ago. The ritual was designed to sacrifice the baby to send Maggie back, thereby meaning there would be fewer casualties as she rampaged through Auchan Milan, which is the name of the town, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong because dumb American. Would it have worked? Well, I can't go into that without spoiling the end of the book for your viewers, so I won't. As for the sex magic, that goes back to the 1800s, the use of sexual energy as a force of magic/power. Ancient rituals can evolve and adapt over time, so it made sense that at some point the townspeople had tried sex magic and possibly enjoyed the ritual, so it just stuck. It also draws a parallel between the bored teenagers just having sex to pass time and the equally bored adults who think they are superior but really just want to have sex too and look for any excuse to do so. I didn't know any of that about like the sex magic as like an actual ritual to manifest power and energy and something like that. So I thought that was a really cool piece of history that he included, that if you know, you know. If you don't, you're like, wow, these are crazy old people. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I thought it was really cool. I liked that response, and I thought it offered some good context and just made the entire story a little bit more complex and more layers to it.
Yeah, rounded, yeah.
Yeah, definitely more well-rounded, and had some truth in reality too, or
right.
or lied in some reality. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like it's still
some
like
basis in reality.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
we got there.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I like that. I like the end where it's like, or who think they're superior and just want to have sex too and look for any excuse. So it's like the hypocrisy of the town at the same time. So I appreciate that part where it's like they want to act like they're better than teenagers, but it's just all hypocrisy. And, that can relate to real life.
Yeah.
So next question. How do you know when to stick to an idea when you're writing a book? If it obsesses me and it's all I can think about. That said, even though I outline my books, if I come up with a better idea as I'm writing, I'll go with it and see where it leads. Nothing is ever set in stone. That's pretty cut and dry. Yeah. That's pretty much
I think that's pretty cut and dry, but it's cool. If any of you are out there and want to become writers, don't feel like, or creators in any sense, I guess, not just writers or anything, but if you want to become creators in any sense, just let things come to you and let that flow go, and you'll end up with incredible pieces of work, such as Maggie's Grave. I agree. I think that one was pretty cut and dry. So the next question is our fourth question, and it is, what's the weirdest or darkest rabbit hole you've gone down while writing a story? I think this one kind of came from, we even just looking at the titles and covers of all of his different books, there's a lot of different topics. So we kind of had the idea of like, what kind of research does this guy do? So we wanted to ask this question because of that. His response was, my book, Dead Girl Blues, is about snuff movies, and I researched them during writing. Although snuff movies, murder specifically for entertainment to be purchased, don't really exist, there's a lot of very messed up stuff out there on the internet that I do not recommend anyone ever watching. I'm glad that's where he left that answer. Yeah. I don't want to know. Yeah. He just imagine he just follows that up with 10 links of don't watch any of these.
Don't watch this. Yeah.
But I can only imagine the stuff that's out there. And Dead Girl Blues, I think I've never really watched, read, or any stories about snuff movies. So that may be a fun a fun story to read, knowing that we like David's work. Diving into just a totally new subgenre of horror.
Yeah, I would be very happy to read something like that too.
Yeah.
Where his writing and his style and everything, I think it is a fun way to dive into this stuff. But I'm not on my computer. I'm not going to Google like snuff film stories or something. You know, like get on a list or something.
Yeah, as if we're not already.
Yeah.
Cool. The next question, number 5.
All right. What's the next book of yours we should read?
Because of who we are, we're always looking for the next read.
Yeah.
And like we've said plenty of times, his work is just so solid that we want to keep consuming it. So we wanted to know. This was maybe a creative way of asking, what's your favorite book of yours?
Yeah. Right.
But
Night Shoot has a similar tone, good gory fun. Or if you want a change of pace, the Haar combines goopy monster horror with romance.
So I think the Haar is actually how I found out about David Sodergren.
I see that on Kindle all the time.
Okay.
That's like, I think that's one that's pushed the most.
Yeah. And I think that's, I don't know, I wouldn't say most successful. I don't know any of that. But that's one that I feel like I've seen the most and have seen very positive reviews on. So I think I might be adding that one to the Kindle Unlimited library and possibly grabbing a physical copy, which is always a good thing that, if I can, I like to do. Just support the authors in as many ways as I can.
Yeah, I would definitely read both these books. I read Navajo Nightmare, like right after this one. I just, I was just needed some more, so I just was like, Navajo Nightmare.
Yeah.
And then just, that one was like only 170 pages. So
okay,
it was
nice.
Fun, quick read. And so, yeah, I want to read the Haar, because I don't even know what a Haar is, or if it is a thing, or if he made it up.
Yeah, but goopy monster horror just sounds fun. And I know like you love monsters, but yeah, goopy monster horror with romance. So, I don't know, audience, if you have any insight between Dead Girl Blues, Night Shoot, although Dead Girl Blues wasn't necessarily a direct recommendation, but between Dead Girl Blues, Night Shoot, or the Haar, if you have input on where we should start between those three, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll make a call for ourselves, because we'll absolutely be reading more of his work. The next question is number 6. Where did your love for horror come from? I like this answer because it's how I feel. He says, always had it for as long as I can remember. I've always been drawn to the spooky and the macabre since I was a small child. I remember one time when I was like super young, I should have been in bed, and my parents were watching The Shining in the living room, and I like went downstairs to get water or something, and then I just ended up like standing in the kitchen, just like zoned in on the TV for so long. And like, although I do remember that being like my first experience with horror and like really starting to fall in love with it from that point on, it felt like it was already kind of there. Where it was just like, that wouldn't have caught my attention if I didn't already have some interest in ghosts and spooky things. And like, so I love that he makes me not feel like I'm alone. Yeah. And that just like being a weird kid interested in some things that scare you. So
yeah, I got a similar story. So when I was younger, we had like Dish Network. And Dish Network, like every couple weekends or so, like couple times a year, they would give you like HBO for like the weekend and to like sample it. And one morning I woke up really early. What's the Clown Invaders from Outer Space? Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Killer Clowns, yep.
Was on. And this is before they had like, you could see what the movie name was and everything. Like this is before any of that. So I just turned that on and I was watching it and I was just like, this better not awaken anything in me.
Here we are 25 years later.
Yeah, and I was like, I love this. Because it was just like this goofy horror movie. And they're clowns. And I didn't know at the time, but it's like classic. And and so ever since then, I was like more of that. And I grew up watching Scooby-Doo. I was always a big Scooby-Doo guy.
Scooby was one of my favorites. I remember watching the Goosebumps. We had like the DVD pack. I remember watching those all the time when I was younger. Yeah, it just was something that kind of felt like it was always there. And once I realized that it was a thing and I was interested in it and there was more to be had, it was like, yep, keep it coming, keep it coming. So, cool. Next question. I think it's
my turn. If you could turn one of your books into a movie or show, which book and how or who would be your dream lead actor or actress? I'd love to see my noirish slasher mystery Dead Girl Blues. So there's Dead Girl Blues.
Yep.
Adapted by Brian D. Palma or Dario Argento. Not a great reader.
We're getting there. That's why we're reading.
We're getting there. As for actors, I never write with anyone in mind, and I'm not familiar enough with modern actors to say for sure. I like Sydney Sweeney, who doesn't, and she seems to enjoy horror, so maybe her in the lead role.
I would love to read Dead Girl Blues to get some context.
I would too. I feel like that would be a good read.
And maybe read it with her in mind, just to like see, because she does do a great job in horror movies. So read it with her in mind. Even just the cover of that book, I think, is like, it's like a pretty blonde girl, like, ah. Yeah, and then there's like somebody coming after her, I think with a video camera in their hand. I don't know. But it's something like that. So to read that with her in mind could be cool.
I was just going to say I always picture Sydney Sweeney as the main role. Any book I read.
Any book I read, any movie I'm watching, I just replace her.
Yeah.
Cool. Number 8, so we've got this one and then 2 more following it. Are there any horror tropes you refuse to use in your writings and why? He says, not really. It's hard in this day and age to avoid certain tropes, e.g., why not use their cell phones to call for help? I don't mind tropes and cliches because it's what you do with them and how you present them that matters. I just try to put my own spin on things. He brings up a great point that I hadn't really considered when we were drafting these questions. Was like, it's hard to avoid certain tropes. Like there have been so many pieces of work put out there that even the little things, like you can attribute anything to a trope of one type or the other. So I love the idea of him trying to write and just whatever feels best to him. Just write it. You're going to include some tropes, you're going to exclude others, but if a story is calling to you and you want to write about it, to just lean in and write about it, I think is a great way to approach storytelling. Yeah,
Maggie's Grave, like talking about cell phones and stuff like that, like if you think about Maggie's Grave, like who would they even call? Like they tried calling the cops, that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, and then the whole town, like everybody you know is in that town.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't even call anybody there, so.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, and I would say he even did a good job of avoiding that trope in Maggie's Grave. Yeah. Of just like, calling for help wasn't going to save anything in that book. So it was just like, made it a non-issue. Like, you just get it out of there. It's not even a valid question. Yeah.
All right, we're on question 9. How do you tap into your own fears while writing? And he said, I don't really. With a couple exceptions, my books are generally not written to be scary. They're a fun roller coaster rides. Other than that, my fears are pretty universal. Death, aging, spiders. So they're pretty easy to include. That's pretty solid. I would say, yeah, the fun roller coaster rides, and that's what we do like about his writing. It is fun. It's not like a horrible horror book. Yeah, where it's like you just feel dread while you're reading it. Like you feel fun and entertained.
Yeah.
Having a good time. So I
mission accomplished there, then, David, because that's exactly how I felt reading Maggie's Grave, and I'm sure I will reading other of his works. Was just, I'm not sitting there shaking like in a dark room afraid to go get a glass of water or whatever. It's just a fun read. It's a really good story. It's a roller coaster ride, different pacing, different the cat and mouse game of Maggie's Grave. A lot of that is just great reads. So I'm glad that also our interpretation of Maggie's Grave is kind of how he thinks about his own writing. It feels like, we're understanding what he's going for, which
Right.
is an ode to his abilities as well. Our last question, number 10. What's a horror novel or movie you wish you had written, and what would you have done differently? His response is, I love Italian horror movies like Suspiria, 1977, and The Beyond. And I would change nothing because they're perfect. I love how these films are totally unafraid for their horror sequences to make absolutely no sense and explain very little. It's hard to do in writing because unless people know your style very well, they just assume you've made a mistake and left out important information or write it off to plot holes, which can be annoying because I'm a big fan of horror that does not explain itself. I love to leave things up to the reader to decide and keep exposition to the bare minimum. I've written one book that does precisely that, Rotten Tommy, which offers almost no explanation for its bizarre and surreal fever dream horrors. That last sentence too just made me want to read Rotten Tommy. Like, that sounds like such a cool concept,
right.
where it's just a trip. It's not, this is the backstory and this and that. Not that that's always a bad thing, but Rotten Tommy just sounds cool.
Yeah.
And I love that. He loves the works for what they are and doesn't think they need his own twist on them or anything. But also when he said, I love how these films are totally unafraid for their horror sequences to make absolutely no sense and explain very little. I think that's great, and I can see where it's really difficult to do that without people being like, dude just doesn't know what he's doing. But it's like, no, I just want to leave it open-ended.
Yeah.
Which kind of even circles back to the first question of like, what's Courtney's deal? And it's like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know, ultimately it can be whatever you want it to be, but it doesn't matter, which I think is just super cool. So I guess we'll add that to the list as well. Rotten Tommy, Dead Girl Blues, The Haar, or Night Shoot. Which of those four should we read next? If any of you know, we'd love to have your input on that. Those were all the questions we had for David. Once again, thank you so much for responding to us as quickly and as thoroughly as you did. We know we're very small in the grand scheme of things and appreciate the time that he was able to give to us. If any viewers are able to support him in any way by buying his books or even reading them on Kindle Unlimited, give him a follow on Instagram. All that'll be in the description, but make sure you do that. Seems like just such a really genuine guy who writes really fun stories. And I feel like I'm saying it for the 100th time, but we will absolutely be reading more of his work.
Definitely.
I think that wraps it up for this video. We'll always reach out to the authors. We can't always promise replies as great as David gave us, but we'll always give it a go. So if there's questions you want us to ask authors in the future, please throw them in the comments, and we'll kind of keep a running list of different ways to pick their brains. But that being said, that will do it for this video. Thank you so much for joining us.
Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. Check out our videos. We got a lot of stuff coming up the next couple months. A lot of big stuff, a lot of different stuff.
And we're figuring it out. So, you know, if you have ideas or requests or books or content or anything, a great place you can throw out those suggestions is in our Discord. We've got some channels in there that are open for communication and just, you know, keep this conversation going. Feel free to throw any suggestions, recommendations, anything like that out there. We'd love to engage with you guys and keep the conversation going outside of this. So Discord and Fable are both great ways to do that. Fable, we've got a book club going on there. Every month we'll have our book of the month on there for you to kind of throw comments. I really like the way Fable's set up with the chapter by chapter conversation, so you can avoid spoilers and kind of throw thoughts out there as the story progresses. So
Definitely. Yeah, so until next time, thanks for traveling to the frightful frontier with us.